Hello, Mayor Jeff Schielke giving you my weekly report on Friday, January 22nd, 2021. And needless to say, there's a lot of questions floating around town on a variety of subjects, so let me get with it here. The number one thing that seems to be on the minds of most Batavians is the shots for the pandemic and the coronavirus. And so we have been advised that we will probably see some activity in Batavia or in Kane County in the near future. The Kane County Health Department, which is overseeing this, they are the health department for the city of Batavia, and most of the other cities in Kane County is the kind of the contact agency, and the delay seems to be coming between the federal and the state governments as to how much of the vaccine serum that they send to Illinois and who gets it and whatever, and those are certainly circumstances beyond. But as you know, they just came out with a new program that anybody over 65 and a number of critical workers in our workplaces have been designated to be the next ones in line. And so we are hopeful that there'll be some designated locations here designated within the next few days, and we will get on with it. We are doing everything at the city that we can to be cooperative. We get numerous calls throughout the day for residents who want to know more about it. And the best advice I can give to anybody in Batavia right now is go to the Kane County Health Department's website, which is canehealth.com. And pick that up and see what the latest word is. It changes certainly day by day and sometimes hour by hour. And so we're hoping that they'll be able to list here very soon locations where residents who are in the first category should be able to get their shots. I will tell you that we have had the opportunity to have most of the paramedics and the police officers who are our first responders and who go into situations where people do have the coronavirus in town. We've gotten many of them taken care of. And so we are moving. We do have some shot activity, but it's all for the critical people, the healthcare providers, and those first responders are the ones who rightfully should get it because they're the ones who are right in the face of the whole thing. So on that whole same subject, I am to announce that Kane County moved to Tier 2 on January 18th, which kind of loosens things up a little bit more than they were previously. And we are expecting to any day to move to Tier 1. Now when we get to that one will allow for restaurants to reopen. They can't have more than 25 people in the building and at a bar or a restaurant, and they have to be socially distanced, and tables have to be 6 feet apart, etc., etc. So I'm encouraging everybody to continue to wear their mask as I always do. I took mine off because I was doing this report and it's easier for people to hear me and understand me without that mask on. But we continue to encourage you to do social distancing, to wear the mask, and to frequently wash your hands, because those are all things that we are very, very necessary that we do, that we don't communicate this any more than it already has. And Batavia continues to be one of the cities in the Chicagoland area with one of the lower numbers, although we are gaining, we have a number of people, well over 1,000 now, that have been diagnosed with it, and we've had several people apparently pass away, which is very regretful. So we want to make sure that we keep our guard up. And again, that information, if you want to know about it, is Kane, capital K, A, then the rest of it is lowercase A-N-E, health, H-E-A-L-T-H, @.com, canehealth.com. And so we will be moving forward with that. And I am told that the Batavia Library plans to reopen for public access with restrictions on January 26th. And they have wonderful online materials available, and those are available at the BataviaPublicLibrary.org. And the Batavia Park District will be resuming some of their recreational programming, and their offices will reopen also on Monday, January 25th, and their address for further information is BataviaParks.org. And we are told that we may be having a pretty good snowstorm this weekend. And so we've got our crews all ready, we got our trucks filled with salt, we got all the plows cleaned, and we will be doing the best we can. We've had people express their concerns to us about the way we plow. They get their driveway cleaned out, and then we come along and dump snow at the end of their driveway. Well, unfortunately, we can't go driveway to driveway to driveway and clear everybody's driveway out, so we ask for your cooperative spirit on that. I know a lot of people who are really dedicated toward the idea of, going out and shovel their walk and shovel their driveway, and God bless them, and I just hope that nobody slips or falls or gets their feet hurt or injures their foot or anything else, breaks their arm, because this is the time of the year when this is going to happen, and we want to make sure that everybody remains safe. And so I have some friends in my age group that are very adamant about going out and shoveling and plowing, and I worry about some of them very much because it can be a dangerous exercise, and do as little as you possibly can, and hopefully one of your neighbors, or if you know somebody that's a good friend, maybe they would come over and shovel your walk out and throw some salt on your driveway. And I know of a couple instances in town where that's already been done, and I know people that do it would be more than happy to continue to do it for those that need it. So we are very, very proud of our snow plowing team in Batavia. I'm told that people say our streets are probably the first to be cleaned, and I've had people from other towns tell me about how good Batavia is in taking down their snow and getting it plowed away and the streets cleaned and whatever. So we wear that with a badge of honor that we are doing that. The one thing we would ask that you maybe help us with, if you've got a fire hydrant near your house, if you could make sure that that is visible, so if there's, God forbid, there's a fire, the firemen will know quickly where to go for the hydrant and get it hooked up, and we get water flowing to help you there. But again, the bottom line here is please be careful, because this is a very, very, very challenging time. And again, we want to make sure that we don't have anybody slipping and breaking their foot. So again, those are the messages for the moment. One other thing I would like to, in talking to our police department, we are continuing to be plagued with a lot of people attempting to pull crime off, specifically on senior citizens. And so be very, very cautious. If anybody calls you or sends you a suspicious letter or whatever, please don't hesitate to call 911 and make a police report about it. But among all else, unless you know who you're talking to, please do not give away your social security number, any credit card numbers, your driver's license number, because we've now found that some people, or specifically credit cards, they use those to then go out and take the number, and with all the information you've given them, when it expires and your code and everything else, and they'll be charging up a bunch of stuff and having it delivered to some strange spot, and people are then getting the bill at the end of the month. So we want to make sure that that kind of is kept down, and we want to hope that we have got some time. So I'm going to close this week with a little story about Batavia history, because as we all know, this past week was the presidential inauguration, and I'm not going to get into that. Everybody could see it and has their opinion and whatever. But what I would like to share is we've got kind of an interesting anecdote about our town and its history regarding the presidents of the United States, who I might add were not presidents when they visited Batavia, but we got some actual dates and times when presidents of the United States were in Batavia. And one of the things I would like to share is that on July 21st, 1919, Dwight D. Eisenhower, who was then a very young lieutenant colonel in the United States Army, had an experience in Batavia, Illinois. And I want to tell about it. He was part of a military convoy that was put together by the U.S. military in 1919 at the end of World War I to make a cross-country trip of the United States, starting in Washington, D.C. at the White House and going across and ending at San Francisco. And they wanted to see how long it would take and what issues any traveler would run into if they tried to drive from Washington, D.C. to San Francisco. And then, of course, they were successful in doing this. It took them 62 days to do it. They had 75 military vehicles, and they had 295 military personnel, many of whom were engineers and other people that had some construction background. And they went and they mapped this route out, and specifically they mapped out where there was a bridge, where there was a creek, what was the condition of the road that was there, and what would be, and so they started in Washington, and they came up through the Maryland, and then got into Pennsylvania, and then went into Ohio, and then they got into Indiana, and then they got into, I believe they spent a night in South Bend, Indiana, and then the next night they spent in Chicago Heights, Illinois, right over the border. And once they got done at Chicago Heights, now when they would come into a town, they would have a park already pre-planned where they would bivouac and set up their tents and whatever, and they had some pretty good searchlights with them that had been invented for the military by then, so that many times at night they would put on a searchlight show for the residents at the nighttime. And it was told that in many places people would come out and give cookies, or where they stayed all night, many times people would bake stuff and bring it over to them and whatever. And so this was, at the end of the day, it was a very successful experience. But when they stayed the night in Chicago Heights, their next goal was to spend the next night, when they got up the next morning, go to DeKalb, which they were able to do. It took them 10.5 hours to go from Chicago Heights to DeKalb, driving at probably under 20 miles an hour that they were traveling. And then they would stop and vehicles would break down and whatever have you. So when they left Chicago Heights, they went on the route of old Route 30, and they went into Joliet, and then at Joliet they turned and came north up, I believe it would have been 30, I guess it was 30, up to Aurora. And when they got to Aurora, the Lincoln Highway was proposed then to get on what today is Illinois Route 31. So one of the things they wanted to do was go by Mooseheart, because Mooseheart at that point had its own concrete paved highway right in front of the Mooseheart campus. It had been a special project that had been done because Mooseheart had just been opened in 1914, and it was in a really moving place, and it was taking in all the orphans and people that needed help. So it was a glorious spot along the road, and so there was going to be a little ceremony when they got them up to Mooseheart, which there was, and they all got to ride their vehicles for, I don't know, 2,000 feet on the front of Mooseheart. And then when they got to the north end of Mooseheart, lo and behold, here was this hill. Now all of us are familiar that that hill is still there today, although I am told that the hill was at a much steeper grade than what it is today. So they take these 75 military vehicles and they slowly go up top to the top of the hill, and they go get back on level ground up there about where the Lincoln Inn restaurant now is. But lo and behold, most of the vehicles were starting to steam and overheat because they had shifted their water so much on this hill coming up there by Mooseheart. So they were in desperate need of water. So they lumbered along till they got to the west side Batavia Cemetery, and they stopped. And the only thing that they could find at the west side cemetery was a small drinking faucet. Well, then people use that to water their flowers with. So the city had put the water system in there in 1913, and so there was some water available. So they started doing that, but they weren't getting much water out of this thing for all the vehicles that they needed to overheat. So we had a city public works director at the time by the name of Allie Perry. And Allie Perry got word that this was happening, and so they ended up taking the trucks. He went down and told him, he says, why don't you move these trucks up to the front of the new Batavia High School, which had been built in 1915 at Batavia Avenue and Wilson Street, and we have a horse drinking trough in front of it. And here's a picture of the horse drinking, and you can see it on the screen. I'm sure we're going to take this off and put it in as I'm talking, but they brought it up, and that was hooked directly to the city water system, so they could get as much water very quickly as they wanted to out of there. So they were able to get this done. So, but I'm told that when they got to the West Side Cemetery, the Newton Monument that's still down there today had just been dedicated that Memorial Day a month and a half before. So a lot of the soldiers got off the while they were waiting, went over and walked around the Newton Monument, so you have to wonder if Dwight D. Eisenhower wasn't one of them. And then when they got up to Batavia Avenue and Wilson Street, that's when they really, had to spend some time. So we know that Eisenhower stood around there. And I have a picture of Eisenhower, what he looked like when he was in Batavia in 1919. This is right after he graduated from West Point Military Academy. And then I have a picture of what Eisenhower looked like today. Or not today, but when he was president. Obviously he's been dead for a long time. But this is his picture then. And then the other interesting anecdote about Batavia is that when they stopped there, I gave earlier in the year a talk about the 50th anniversary of John Kennedy's visit to Batavia. And we have a lot of pictures of that, and I showed them at that occasion. But this is a picture of Kennedy also standing in front of the old Batavia High School. And so what's interesting about this whole thing is there's kind of a collision of history. We had the Eisenhower, who was the guy who created the U.S. Space Administration during his presidency in 1958. We had Kennedy, who in 1961 as president made the commitment that the U.S. would land a man on the moon before the end of the decade of the 1960s. And also at the intersection at Batavia Avenue and Wilson, we have the Methodist Church, which was between 1915 and 1918. The minister there was a gentleman by the name of Reverend Fayard Moon. He ends up being the grandfather of Buzz Aldrin, who landed on the moon. So we probably have three of the principal people who landed the U.S. on the moon, had some interesting role in it, all have visited Batavia at the intersection of Batavia Avenue and Wilson. So the next time you go through there, think about that, or I'm hoping we'll get a little sign up that will tell that story, because that is an amazing story. The two U.S. presidents and the grandfather of the astronaut that landed on the moon all have been in that intersection. So that's my story for today. Have a great week. Be careful. Watch the weather forecast this weekend, and we may have some snow. And have a great week. Thanks.